you have to move on from these things. Uh, did David receive punishment for his sin? He certainly did. And did he make his peace with God and receive forgiveness? He certainly did. And so in a situation like that, you have to move on and do what's right. I think probably David should have carried that out. I'm not saying he sinned by not doing so, but I'm just saying it would not have been hypocritical. David threw himself upon the mercy of God. Joab never once apologized and said, oh, you know what? My bad. I shouldn't have done that. I killed an innocent man. Joab was always looking to advance himself. He's always, as we talked about numerous times, worried about appearance. He never showed any kind of remorse for any of those actions. David did. David made it right with God. Joab never did. That's why he's still guilty, and that's why David is giving this charge to Solomon. But David would have been perfectly justified in carrying that out himself because he made things right, whereas Joab did not. But he turns it over to Solomon, be that as it may, and probably feeling like Solomon could be more just in this matter than he. Whatever the reason he does, he turns it over to Solomon, and he says, you make sure he doesn't grow old in peace because he has innocent blood on his hands. But show kindness to Barzillai, the Gileadite. Verse 7 beginning, let them be of those that eat at thy table, for so they came to me when I fled because of Absalom thy brother. Of course, 2 Samuel 17, he's fleeing from Absalom. Barzillai comes out, brings provisions. And, he actually asked Barzillai to come back and live with him in the palace. And what was Barzillai's response? Well, we know he said no, but why? I'm just too old. I'm a homebody. He says, you don't want me to be a burden on you. What about my servant here? And so David says, fine. He lets his servant come. And so he's telling Solomon, you keep taking care of Barzillai's people because he took care of me. And then he says, verse 8, you've got with you Shimei, the son of Gera, a Benjamin of Bahurim, which cursed me with a grievous curse in the day I went to Mahanaim, but he came down to meet me at Jordan. I swear to him by the Lord, saying, I will not put thee to death with the sword. So he gave Shimei his word. I don't know if he was just in a good mood when he was on his way back, that God had delivered him out of the hands of his enemies, and he was able to go back and take the throne. But whatever, he promised Shimei, gave him his word, and he wasn't going to put him to death. But Shimei cursed the Lord's anointed. Now, we need to understand here, David's not mad for his own sake. He cussed me or he cursed me, and I want him dead. David, in fact, says to, I just went blank, the guy that went with him. It may have been, it wasn't Joab, I don't think. But anyways, one of the men who was with him who says, let me go over there and I'll take his head off. And David says to his man, hey, maybe I deserve this. I've messed up. I've had my share of mistakes. Maybe I deserve this. David understands that, he had made some mistakes, and part of this, all these events with Absalom, were consequences of his sin with Bathsheba and of course, going on and killing Uriah. But you still ought to respect the office. And that was David with King Saul. Saul was not, in the last part of his life, was not living like God wanted him to live. David could have said to himself, well, God has said I'm going to be king. Saul's not a good man. He's not following God, so I'm really doing God a favor by killing him. But David never viewed it that way, and rightfully so. He viewed it as, that is God's anointed, and I'll respect that office even if I can't respect that individual. And so David tells Solomon concerning Shimei, verse 9, hold him not guiltless, for thou art a wise man. You know what you ought to do to him. His hoar head, his gray hair, bring thou down to the grave with blood. So David dies, verse 10. Slept with his fathers is the expression. We've talked about that in other classes, that Hebrew idiom. And he was buried in the city of David. So, of course, the days he reigned over Israel, 40 years, 7 years in Hebron, 33 years in Jerusalem. So Solomon is established upon the throne. Verse 12, his kingdom's established greatly. So Adonijah comes, and now he's going to use Bathsheba and try to ask for a favor. So she says to him, do you come peaceably? And of course he says, I do. he says, I have somewhat to say unto thee. She said, say on. He says in verse 15, look, you know the kingdom was mine. All Israel set their faces on me that I should reign. Howbeit the kingdom is turned about and become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. I don't know if he really means this or if he's just trying to butter her up. We're not told. Now I ask one petition of thee, deny me not. And she says, well, say on. Speak, I pray thee, unto Solomon the king, for he will not say thee nay. He was not going to say no to you, his mother, that he give me Abishag the Shunammite to wife. Bathsheba seems okay with this. No indication that she has or sees any issue with it. So she says, well, I will speak unto thee, for thee, unto the king. So she goes to King Solomon. King rose up to meet her, bowed down himself to her, sat down on his throne. By the way, I think there's something here that's worth noticing, is the respect that Solomon shows his mother. He's the king. He's grown. He's not under mama's roof anymore. He's not under her authority in that sense, but it's his mama. And so he shows respect. He rises up to meet her, bowed himself unto her, and sat down on his throne, and caused a seat to be set for the king's mother, and she sat on his right hand. Again, there's significance to that, on the right hand. So he's showing respect to his mother. And so she says, I have a small favor to ask, a small petition, the King James says. I pray thee, say me not nay. King says, ask on, my mother, for I will not say thee nay. You know I'm not going to say no to you, Mom. Of course, he doesn't know what the request is. He spoke too soon, didn't he? And she says, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to Adonijah thy brother to wife. And buddy, you can almost just see in your mind's eye the color rising in Solomon's face. This greatly angered him. And so he says, why don't you ask Abishag, why don't you just ask for him the kingdom also? For he's my older brother. Even for him, for Abiathar the priest, for Joab the son of Zeruiah. He gets really upset here. He says, look, first it's Abishag, why don't you just go on and ask for the kingdom? That's what he's playing you for. And he seems to be concerned here because as one person put it, I was looking for the way this one fellow put it. Said it would give him a superior appearance before the people. I like that. In other words, here's a guy that, he tried to usurp the throne. And Solomon has graciously allowed him to live. You don't want to do anything at this point that allows him to be, makes him even appear to be superior in the eyes of the people. So Solomon is very upset about this. He sees through the ruse. And he also is probably upset because Adonijah is playing Bathsheba here. He's using her because he knows Solomon's going to be respectful to his mother. He doesn't want to say no to his mother. And so he's upset probably as much about that, or almost as much at least, as he is about the other. So King Solomon sware by the Lord, verse 23, saying, God do so to me and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. And he says, as the Lord lives, which has established me, set me on the throne of David, and has made me an house, Adonijah shall be put to death this day. So he sent by the hand of Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, and he fell upon him that he died. Again, without a whole lot of information, you're hesitant to speculate too much. May very well have been that Solomon was kind of looking for a reason, looking for an excuse with Adonijah from the day that he committed that treasonous act and tried to usurp the throne. And Solomon says, you show yourself a good man and you'll live. But if there's wickedness found in you, you're going to die. So it would seem, too, that Abishag, she was never with David in a physical relationship. She was there to help him to get warm because of the circulation issues. It may be, though, that just based off of that, she should have been kept aside, provided for, taken care of, but not someone to go and try to marry her. That may be part of it. Certainly, he's upset because Adonijah's gone behind his back and tried to use his own mother to kind of wiggle his foot back in the door. Whatever all the reasons were, he's upset, and he says, this is it. And so he sends Benaiah. Benaiah falls upon him and kills him. So that's the end of Adonijah. Then Solomon has some stern words for Abiathar, the priest. He says, you go down to Anathoth, to your own fields. You're worthy of death, but I'm not at this time going to put thee to death because, again, you see Solomon showing respect here, because thou bearest the ark of the Lord God before David my father, and because thou hast been afflicted in all wherein my father was afflicted. Well, you were with David when he fled. You were with him in a lot of hard times, and you stuck by him, and so that's not lost on me. I'm not going to kill you even though you're worthy of death. Now, of course, any treasonous act was worthy of death. So Solomon thrust out Abiathar from being priest unto the Lord. It's interesting because all this is, verse 27, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord which he spake concerning the house of Eli and Shiloh. The latter parts of 1 Samuel chapter 2, remember? The child Samuel receives this vision from the Lord. He hears God calling, and he thinks it's Eli, and finally Eli tells him to say, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. And his first prophecy that he received from the Lord was concerning the house of Eli. Eli didn't discipline his children, you recall. And so his children, his boys grew up, and they were just awful. They were priests, but they were engaging in all kind of illicit sexual activity with women. They were stealing sacrifices from the people, all kinds of just abominable actions. And so God says, Eli, you should have intervened. You should have disciplined your sons. And because you didn't, the priesthood's going to be taken from you. So it was all the way down here in the beginning of Solomon's reign, but it was fulfilled. When God says something, it may seem like it's taken a while to be fulfilled in our eyes, but it will be fulfilled. So then tidings come to Joab. Joab had turned after Adonijah, though he turned not after Absalom. In other words, Joab sees the writing on the wall. Wait a minute. Adonijah's been killed. I was with Adonijah. And he gets word. He sent Abiathar the priest home and told him, you're worthy of death, but I'm not going to kill you because you bear the ark of God. Joab's probably getting to thinking, maybe I'm next. So what do? Well, he runs into the tabernacle and grabs hold of the horns of the altar. It's the idea of refuge. But it was refuge for what kind of person? For an innocent person. Now, this is designed for someone that's particularly, later on there will be, or not later on, there are also these cities of refuge. Same thing, it's an innocent person. It's what we would call manslaughter. There's an accident happens, someone is killed. This is not murder, as Joab carried out against Amasa and Abner. So he goes and he grabs hold of the horns of the altar as if that's going to save him. They tell King Solomon that he's done that. Solomon tells Benaiah, go. You fall on him right there. He says, come forth, is what Benaiah says. He doesn't want to kill him with him holding on to the horns of the altar. And old Joab says, nope, I'm going to die right here. You're going to kill me. You're going to kill me right here. And so Benaiah goes to the king. You kind of feel bad for poor old Benaiah here. The Bible doesn't tell us, but I get the idea that he goes and he's like, hey, you come away from that altar. And Joab says, nope, not going to do it. And so Benaiah doesn't just kill him. He goes back to the king and says, hey, look, he won't leave the altar. And Solomon says, do as he said. Fall upon him, bury him, that thou mayest take away the innocent blood which Joab shed from me and from the house of my father. And the Lord shall return his blood upon his own head, who fell upon 2 men more righteous and better than he, and slew them with the sword. My father David, not knowing thereof, to wit, Abner the son of Ner, captain of the host of Israel, and Abner the son of Jether, and Amasa, son of Jether, captain of the host of Judah. Their blood therefore shall return upon the head of Joab and upon the head of his seed forever, but upon David and upon his seed and upon his house and upon his throne shall there be peace forever from the Lord. Joab, your line ends right here. David's line is going to live on and on and on. But he tells Benaiah, don't feel bad about this. If he's determined he's not going to let go of the horns of the altar, you go kill him right there, but you've got to take away the innocent blood from Israel. So Benaiah goes, and he fell upon him and slew him. He was buried in his own house in the wilderness. So Benaiah is put over the host. Zadok the priest is put in the space or in the place of Abiathar. So he calls for Shimei, and he has some instructions for Shimei, Solomon does. You build a house in Jerusalem, you dwell there. Was that the first bell or second? Okay, I better hurry. He says, you go build a house in Jerusalem and you dwell there, and I'm gonna let you live. But the day that you pass over the brook Kidron, know for certain you'll surely die, and your blood is going to be on your own head. What's the old expression? Sometimes all you got to do is give a fellow just enough rope to hang himself. And that's what he does for Shimei here. He says, as long as you stay within those limits, you're going to live. And so Shimei says, well, the saying is good. Well, of course, he gets to live, right? And he dwelt in Jerusalem many days. 3 years pass. Time doesn't take away God's word, and Solomon here, his command, it held fast. 3 years passed, and maybe that's what Shimei's thinking. Maybe he thinks 3 years. Maybe he got lax and forgot about it himself, or thought it wouldn't be as serious. Who knows? But 3 years have passed. 2 of the servants of Shimei ran away. They go into Gath, and so they tell Shimei, hey, your servants are in Gath. And so he gets up, and off he goes. And he brings them home. But it was told Solomon. There's always somebody looking to tell, right? I mean, we have a big family in our house, and we know a lot about tattling. And sometimes I get on to the tattlers as much as the ones in trouble. That's a two-edged sword, by the way, because I remember growing up, and sometimes my sister and I would conspire not to tattle, and things that probably should have come to Mama's attention that didn't. But anyway, there's always somebody looking to tattle on you, right? There's always somebody looking to say, oh, look what he did. So somebody came and told and said, hey, Shimei went from Jerusalem to Gath, and he's come back again. So the king sends and calls Shimei, and of course says, I made you to swear, and I told you, on the day that you do that, you would surely die. And what did you say? The word that I've heard is good. Why haven't you kept the oath of the Lord and the commandment I charged you? And he said, you know, he reminds him, you know all the wickedness that you did to David my father. And therefore the Lord shall return thy wickedness upon thine own head. Solomon shall be blessed, the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Again, he says, Shimei, your line ends here. David's line, on and on and on, even to this day, in the seed of, the spiritual seed of God, the church. So the king commanded Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, which went out and fell upon him, that he died. And the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. So Solomon is established as king now. When you open up chapter 1, this is kind of, in some sense, the beginning of the end for Solomon. It's, in one way, it's his highest point, but it opens up by saying he made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter. So that's the beginning of taking those foreign wives. But the people are sacrificing in high places. There's a house built unto the name of the Lord until those days. But Solomon at this point still loves the Lord. He's walking in the statutes of David, but he's sacrificing and burning incense in high places. So he's starting to wonder, and that's not coincidental, by the way, with marrying the foreign wives. So he goes to Gibeon, and he offers a great sacrifice there, and the Lord appears to him in a dream and says, ask what I shall give thee. And Solomon, at probably one of the high points, well, probably the high point of his life, he says, you've showed great mercy to David, just according as he walked before you in truth, righteousness, uprightness of heart. You've kept for him this great kindness that you've given him a son to sit on his throne, and you've made me king instead of David my father. I'm just a child. I don't know how to go out or come in. I don't know how to rule these people. Thy servants in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered or counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. For who is able to judge this thy so great a people? Solomon, of course, we know, we've studied it since we were children. He's given the chance to ask God for anything he wants, and he asks for wisdom. And of course, the speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And so we'll pick up there, Lord willing, next week in verse 11 and see how God's going to bless Solomon with more wisdom than he ever could have imagined. And of course, as we go on, we're going to see that Solomon, in spite of all that wisdom, he blew it. We're going to look throughout the year, some on Sunday nights throughout this year, Lord willing. We're going to look some at different characters of characters that we read about in the Bible, some Old Testament characters, some New Testament characters. One of those we're going to look at is Solomon, and how he was the world's wisest fool. He had so much wisdom, and yet he made some really bad choices pertaining to wives. So thank you very much for your time and attention. We'll have a short break before our worship period at 10 o'clock. Thank you.